Hey everybody, it's Ron from Pick Dawgz, and welcome to the Bank Shot Breakdown, the third season of the Bank Shot Breakdown. We're going to go over 5 college basketball plays every day from the start of the regular season right here all the way to the national championship game in April. Super excited for this year's college basketball campaign. If you like what you see, make sure to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe. Put your college basketball picks in the comments section below. Let me know who you like to make the Final Four, potential championship contenders that you got some future wagers on. I certainly have my eyes on a few. I'll talk about a few of those in this video. And I'm also running my preseason and first week of the season college basketball season pass special. Special price for the first week of the season. It's going to get you every single college basketball play, premium play that I release in the regular season, non-conference tournaments, conference tournaments, and of course the postseason tournaments and the NIT and the big one, the Big Dance, March Madness. So you can check that out at Pickdawgz Premium. There's a link in the description. Take advantage of that deal while it lasts, only for a week. Alrighty, here we go. It's the first day of the college basketball season. We got a huge card. I suggest you tread lightly. It's definitely a tough preparation, especially with the day of the transfer portal and NIL. But here are the first 5 games of the college hoop season. First up, let's talk about an afternoon game between St. Louis and Santa Clara. This one 3 p.m. Eastern on YouTube. It's a neutral site game in the Field of 68 showcase in South Dakota, and Santa Clara right now is the small favorite, but a lot of these lines, especially night one, but really in general overall in college hoops the first couple of weeks, these lines are volatile. We'll see a lot of line movement, sometimes 5+, 7+ point moves with these games, and especially this year. I mentioned in the intro, tread lightly because it's a tough preparation. It's already pretty difficult to get ready for the college basketball season, see where players are and what teams look like on paper, but especially nowadays with the transfer portal being utilized so much, NIL, players on the move left and right, some of these teams look absolutely nothing like they did the year before. And we have a case in this game where we have experience and the same old with Santa Clara. And St. Louis on the other side, though, the opposite. They really don't return much of any production from last year's team. It's a new head coach and a new system. But in this game, Santa Clara, like I mentioned, they return a lot of production. 5 of their top 6 scorers from last year's team on the roster going into this year. And this was a pretty good team last year. I mean, they won 20 games. They finished at 109 in Ken Palm, so pretty solid for a West Coast Conference team. They were 6-0 to start non-conference play. Yes, they benefited from some weak matchups against teams like Mississippi Valley and St. Francis, but they also put together some nice upset wins on the road. At Stanford was a nice pickup, a 12-point win at Stanford. They took down Oregon in a neutral site game. Washington State, they beat Duquesne, who ended up being a tournament team last year. And in conference play, they picked up a win over Gonzaga, which doesn't happen too often for any other team in the West Coast Conference other than St. Mary's and BYU at the time, but especially for Santa Clara, who's not had a good record against the Zags in their matchups. But Santa Clara, goes to show you, this was a solid team last year, great rebounding team. They return a lot of production and their same system and head coach. And those are the types of teams I am looking to back early in the season, especially in these short spread types of games. St. Louis on the other side, a very solid roster and talented roster on paper, but it is a new look Billikens team. I mean, they new head coach obviously in Josh Schertz. He comes over from Indiana State, which was one of the more flashy and fun to watch teams in college basketball last year. Some of the players that we loved to watch last year from Indiana State, they transferred to St. Louis for this season. And I think the Billikens are going to be competitive for sure in the A-10 and potentially a dark horse to win the conference. But right out of the gates in a neutral site game against an experienced roster, I just don't love this matchup for St. Louis. I think that Santa Clara's experience really prevails in this one, and not just the experience of playing college hoops, because Indiana State has plenty of upperclassmen. It's the fact that Santa Clara has been together. They're a more cohesive unit, and I like their chances at a pretty small price on laying the spread, or you can take them on the money line. Next up, we see the Texas A&M Aggies taking on UCF. This one's going to be 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN+. Texas A&M enters the season as a 13th ranked team in the AP polls, and they're the favorite on the road in this game. You got to give them credit for scheduling these types of games. Honestly, you could argue on paper this is one of the easier games they have on their non-conference schedule because they have really scheduled a gauntlet. Ohio State, Creighton, Oregon, Texas Tech, San Diego State, Wake Forest, Purdue, all these types of games, some of these neutral site games and one semi-road game. We've learned in recent years that you really haven't been punished for losing to good teams, but you can certainly boost your resume if you can pick up some wins over these good teams. So the Aggies are going for it. They're probably going to lose, a handful of these games, but pick up some nice wins, and it's going to help their resume when it comes to getting into the NCAA tournament. I think the Aggies will certainly be back in that tournament and be very competitive in the SEC. The problem is, I don't love this matchup for them, especially laying points on the road. This is a true road game. I backed Texas A&M all the time last year. They were one of my more popular teams to bet on because I thought they were a lot better than their record for most of the season. They were a very efficient team, both offensively and defensively. They were the best offensive rebounding team in the country. They got to the free throw line. They took care of the basketball. The big problem for Texas A&M, they could not hit an open shot. They were ranked 341st in effective field goal percentage in the country, 342nd in three-point, not much better in two-point field goal percentage, and not much better at the free throw line. If this team could hit some open shots, it would have been a national title contender, not just barely getting into the NCAA tournament. So this year we'll see if they can get a boost scoring-wise, but the roster doesn't really, to me on paper, look like things are going to change too much. I still think this will be an efficient team, fundamentally strong team, but I don't want to lay points with a team that I can't trust to score the basketball consistently in a game like this. And I also think UCF is quite underrated going into the season. A team that's not really known for its program basketball-wise, but in the Big 12, I mean, this team returns its top two leading scorers in Darius Johnson and Jalen Sellers. Johnson's a three-point machine. He had right under 40% last year. So UCF already has returning production that it trusts. Some of the transfers I really like from this UCF roster as well. And in a home game, like I said, against a team that is fundamentally strong and will go on to have a strong campaign, but don't trust them offensively quite right now. I got to go with UCF plus the points in this one, and I think they could pull off the upset. Next up, we see Missouri and Memphis. This one, 8 p.m. Eastern on ESPN+. Memphis is a 4.5-point favorite in this one at home, and this is one of the rare rematch games from last year. This is a revenge spot for Missouri, who lost to Memphis by 15 points earlier in non-conference play last year. That was a home game on November 10th against these Memphis Tigers. And, Missouri is not just looking for revenge in this game. They're also looking to put an end to that miserable losing streak that we saw them go on at the end of the season. They go into conference play a modest 8-5. It wasn't their best non-conference schedule, but they still had some decent expectations going into the SEC. They lose every single conference game, 0-18, and then they lose that first round of the conference tournament to Georgia to end the season on a 19-game losing streak. But I think it was more of a kind of a throwaway season for Missouri. It was still, we got to remember a couple years back, 2 seasons ago, they were a solid team in the SEC. And I think they get back to that this year, much more expectations going into the year. And I like this team on paper. Yes, they lose some production, but they bring back their number 2 scorer in Bates, who I think is going to have a great season. And some of their transfers they brought in really, both these teams brought in some great transfers. We know Memphis, Penny Hardaway, he is very, very strong at recruiting and bringing some of these high-profile transfers to Memphis. But Missouri, Tony Perkins at Iowa, he does a little bit of everything. He can score. He had about 14 points per game last year. He also had 4 rebounds as a guard. You don't see that too often. 4.6 assists per game. So he is an all-around player. I think he's going to really help Missouri. And also Marquez Warwick, who has been in college basketball for, it seems, 10 years or so. But he's been there for 4 years. But at Northern Kentucky, a great scorer. He had 20 points per game last year. His three-point percentage took a big cut last year down to 30%, but I think he improves that this season and just is another natural scorer for Missouri. I like this Missouri team going into non-conference play, and I think they'll be, not necessarily one of the contenders in the SEC, but they'll be able to pull off some upsets here and there in what is right now a loaded SEC conference. On the other side, like I mentioned, Memphis, they do have to replace a lot of production. This is a team that usually does that. We see a lot of these players go to the NBA or move on to different teams. And David Jones is the key. 22 points per game he scored last year. It's not easy to replace that. And Quinterly, another guy, 13.5 points per game. It's gone. Memphis and Hardaway, they do a great job of recruiting. But for me in this spot with a revenge game for Missouri, a team that's looking to put away that miserable losing streak, I think they get the outright win in this game, honestly. But I'll take the 4.5 points. This is going to be a competitive game, more than likely a high-scoring game. It's why we see a total in the 150s. And I like Missouri to at least cover, if not win. Next up, we see South Florida and Florida. This one, 8:30 Eastern on SEC Network. It's part of the Jacksonville Sports Foundation Invitational. The Gators are a 10.5-point favorite. The total's at 150.5. Now, this is a tough game for South Florida and an emotional game, honestly, for the Bulls. We know last year they had a great season, really out of nowhere. This team went 16-2 in conference play, 25-8 overall for a program that really hasn't done too much in college basketball in the AAC in recent years. It was a big season. They were really only a couple of wins away, key wins away from making the NCAA tournament. But we knew going into this year that it was going to be a tough season because they had to replace a lot of production from last year's great team. And then beyond that, we learned the passing of head coach Raheem Abdur-Rahim just a couple of weeks ago on October 24th. Just awful news there for this program. So expect an emotional game in this one overall. But I just think when you look at the Florida Gators roster on the other side, this is a team that I do think is a dark horse to make a Final Four run this year. I think Todd Golden's system is really working in Florida, and I think he's obviously done a great job of recruiting. They returned some key pieces of last year's team, which made it to the tournament, a team that could score a ton of points. And honestly, I think defensively, this team improves this season. This is a spot where I just think they're too good in this game. I think honestly, we see Florida go on a little bit of run here in non-conference play, put together some blowout wins, and rise in the AP rankings. So give me Florida in this one. I'm going to lay the points in the neutral site game. The final game we're going to talk about for the opening night card in college basketball. It's one of the bigger games on the board, not just for Monday, but in non-conference play in general, and that's Gonzaga and Baylor. May not be my favorite game on the board betting-wise, but I had to talk about it because I know a lot of people are going to be tuning in. It's going to be 11:30 Eastern start time on ESPN2. It's a home game for Gonzaga, and they are the favorite in this one, laying right now 3.5 points. These are two programs, or top 10 teams, that we're used to seeing have stacked rosters going into the year almost every season. Yet again, this season, that's definitely the case. But for me, I think Gonzaga is really a team to watch out for in 24-25 after, I would say, a disappointing result from their last year's team. And yes, they made it to the Sweet 16, but this is a program that expects to be a number 1 or number 2 seed in the tournament every year and make a Final Four run at the very least. And that wasn't the case. They were a 5 seed last year. I think this is a team that has a nice mix between returning production and returning scores, and also some nice transfer pickups. And I think Gonzaga, it's going to be really tough for this team not to score in the high 80s almost every game. And I think in this game, it's going to be a little bit more defensive because Baylor, certainly a solid defensive team. But, man, I mean, I just think Gonzaga does too much in this one. I mean, Baylor, they only return one starter. They bring in some great transfers themselves. This is going to be a team that's one of the favorites to win the Big 12. But for me, on the road and on opening night, I don't think Baylor has enough. And Gonzaga, while this team, like we said, disappointing result last year, they still were a solid non-conference team. They had some nice wins in non-conference play, covered the spread in a few of those as well. I think we see them win and cover here at home. And that's it. Those are the games for Monday's opening night card in college basketball. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Put those college basketball picks in the comments section below. And again, if you are looking for my best bets, including that season pass in college hoops, you can find those at Pickdawgz Premium, and there is a link in the description. As always, this is Romanelli. Good luck. Let's have a great college basketball season together.